welcome to our next installment of the GEMA Talks vidcast series. I'm excited today to introduce Marci Wiseman from Blumhouse Television. Marci, hello.
Hey, Rich, how are you?
Doing well, doing well. Marci is the co-president of Blumhouse Television. She's had a long and storied career in the entertainment media world, so really excited to get her perspective on the industry, perspective of what's happening during this COVID crisis, and just get her general take on where the business is going. And we're also going to talk about her fascinating career journey as well. So Marci, I thought maybe first start off by first saying, how are you? Hopefully everyone's healthy in your world.
Yes, everyone is. Thank you. I'm here in sunny California. Sometimes it's hard to remember in the beauty of where we live. I know you're here too, that there's an actual crisis going on. So
I know. Why don't you start by just telling the audience a little bit more about Blumhouse, and maybe specifically Blumhouse Television, which is a relatively new part of the Blumhouse company.
Of course. So Blumhouse is probably, if anybody is familiar with it, you'll think horror movies, which is what we're most well known for, from The Purge to Insidious to Ouija. And the start of the company was with a little movie called Paranormal Activity, which Jason Blum, who's the founder of the company and a producer impresario, worked for many years to get Paramount Pictures to distribute this little tiny movie shot for $15,000, which
Amazing.
Became the Paranormal Activity phenomenon. It is still, I believe, the most profitable film franchise in movie history because of its low price in making it. And that led to a business model that Jason pursued and has pursued very successfully, to the tune of several $1 billion worth of worldwide box office, in doing low-cost horror movies for theatrical release, where everybody kind of bets on themselves. Blumhouse doesn't take a fee. The talent all get scale, which are union requirements, and everybody participates in the upside if the movie is successful. And we've had many successes, some of the ones that I mentioned to you, as well as more recently, films that are both critically successful as well as successful at the box office. Whiplash, Get Out, and BlacKkKlansman, many of you have probably seen, all nominated for Academy Awards. The last two were winners, not of Best Picture, but of Screenwriting Awards. The more recent film, Us, and then films that explore other issues. The Hunt, which many of you may have watched in the first foray into Premiere at Home, which is part of the substitute strategy for theatrical release, theatrically produced films, as well as Invisible Man, which is based on, with Elizabeth Moss, and based on the classic franchise from Universal Pictures. So that's our film company. And about 4 years ago, Jason really, although he had dabbled in television, decided he wanted to control the destiny of the company in film in the way that he has been able to control the destiny of making movies. On the movie side, Blumhouse greenlights its own movies. It has a first look distribution deal with Universal Pictures, who take most of our films and then distribute them worldwide. And the idea of being able to find properties and really control the development process and be in control of the production process was something that wasn't happening for Blumhouse in television. So I have a background in creating television studios for big and small companies. And my partner, Jeremy Gold, also had recently had the same experience with a foreign television company that put its stake in the ground to do scripted television in the US. And together we were asked to build Blumhouse Television. We came in 2016 and took a minority investment from ITV Studios Global Entertainment in 2017. And since we've come to the company, we've produced 14 television series, 14 productions, including reality documentary series, documentary films, streaming movies, and continuing television series. So we're pretty much doing everything in the entertainment space except making theatrical movies, which our big sister, big brother do very successfully, so we only aspire to their success, even, but we're doing it with different tools. So.
And why don't you tell the audience some of the shows that you have unveiled? And
sure. So on the kind of the prestige projects, probably with a lot of GEMA and Georgetown people are familiar with, we've made two series which have launched and one which is going to launch in August. One is Sharp Objects for HBO, and then another is called The Loudest Voice, which starred Russell Crowe for Showtime, and really tracked the rise of Fox News, and like we like to say, no Ailes, no Trump. And really was the beginning of the idea that news would pass through an echo chamber of ideology as opposed to kind of the old network news model where kind of truth and facts were not kind of open for discussion. And it was very successful. We have another limited series. Both of those were nominated for Emmys and Golden Globes, and we had some wins for both of those shows. And then we have a new show that will be premiering in August, another limited series starring Ethan Hawke, called The Good Lord Bird, which is based on the James McBride National Book Award novel, The Good Lord Bird, which is a retelling in kind of a historical fiction retelling of the story of Bleeding Kansas to Harper's Ferry and abolitionist John Brown's role in all of that. And it's a Twain-esque story, a fictional character, a young slave boy who Brown frees. It goes on the journey with him, and it's his point of view that we see the story unfold. And we like to
airing that.
Showtime. So one series for HBO, two series for Showtime. Please watch Sunday nights. What we were able to do with those prestige shows was to kind of take some product that shows that Blumhouse had done before Jeremy and I got there, namely The Normal Heart, Whiplash, and a documentary series, The Jinx, probably all of which people at GEMA and Georgetown are familiar with, and really look at those as a frame for how we thought about the filter for the television company. And what we like to say is we make television shows and streaming movies that aren't just about the monsters under the bed, but also the things that keep us up at night. And so the goal is to kind of look at sometimes the things and where we came and how we got there are actually scarier than an imagined, haunted house. And even The Purge.
Way to filter it.
Yeah, and we made, so The Purge is our biggest franchise. It's both, we're making our 5th movie in the Purge franchise, and we made 2 seasons of a television series that aired on USA and is now available on Hulu. And The Purge is I think a real mashup of what we do, which is the idea behind The Purge, and often it feels prescient because the kind of anger that's emerged in our kind of national discourse feels like at any moment could explode into this idea of a society which needs to purge its anger. And there are many small incidences that were imagined by James DeMonico, the creator of all of this material, that we see in the news, which is actually truly horrifying, because James actually created The Purge as a cautionary tale about kind of violence and gun violence and things like that. Not, and people understand that when they watch it. So very violent. So not for everybody, but.
So why don't we talk about the coronavirus crisis that we started facing in March. Obviously, it's been a very interesting period of time for the TV production business, and obviously you guys are at the forefront of that. Can you talk a little bit about the impact on your company, on the TV business, and maybe also ways you're navigating through it, or some ways you're adapting?
Yeah, so one of the things that Blumhouse is known for, both on the feature film side and on the TV side, is that we have really pioneered innovative ways to produce content, often at a lower price point than others are able to do. And that isn't always price sensitive, but it's also a nimbleness in how we produce as a smaller independent studio. And so when the coronavirus kind of started to shut down Hollywood, and pretty much all production was shut down during the week of March 16th, when the stay-at-home orders started in California and then expanded nationwide. We were very fortunate in that many of our productions were ending or in post-production. And so those productions kind of went into a separate category, which is how could they be finished remotely. We, I think, are going to successfully finish every production that we were in that state in. That includes The Good Lord Bird. It includes 3 streaming movies for Hulu. We make a series of monthly movies for them that are holiday-themed horror movies, which are really fun. And just released our 21st one last Friday. A little kind of the Blumhouse version of Mother's Day meets the movie Misery. So it's called Delivered. And it's fun. And so we have 3 of those movies that we are in the process. That was one of them. Delivered needed to be finished. We have our June installment and our July installment, both of which will be completed. We have 4 movies for Amazon, all of which will be finished. We had 1 that was completed, and all of which were in post-production and all are finishing. I think I said The Good Lord Bird, and then we have several documentary series, one of which will be premiering in August on FX. And the challenge of doing that was to be able to, the post-production process is kind of like baton passing. There are areas of artisanal kind of specialties, whether they're kind of editing a show, then bringing in music and composers and things like color correction. And they're all areas of particular expertise. Yeah. And they're often people work together in a post-production house or in an editing facility and collaborate in person, because the results are better if these multidisciplines are all kind of looking at the same thing and bringing their best to the table. We were able to move all of those functions that I just talked about. They're more easily moved to a remote location, and we provided all the equipment if our teams didn't have it already. The real challenge in finishing shows is sound, because sound is a really is a discipline where everyone's listening to something and contributing, very sensitive ears to things that need to be fixed. A lot of precision. Tons of precision. It's all digital, and you have mixers. You have an audio mixer who's responsible for the background sound. You have someone who's responsible for the lead character sound, and it's done in a room with a lot of people. And so, and then there's a kind of a high-end digital delivery. You might see it when you watch Netflix, called 5.1. And it's a very specific kind of sound, and it all requires a lot of technical work. And we were able to figure out ways to have our sound teams work remotely, and then when they needed to be together, to go to places where they were separate but together in different rooms. And obviously with the types of sound equipment that none of us mere mortals have, but they have to listen to the sound quality. Then there's another thing that you probably all have seen, which is when a line can't be heard or needs to be fixed or what we call dug out, people go into a recording studio and they have a mic and they either record if you're looking at the back of their head, or they do something called looping, which is they talk and match their lips. That's a very complicated process because they usually need to be directed to do it. But we have also figured out a way to do that. We've sent specialized microphones. We bought microphone kits and we've sent them to our various cast members. They get moved around the country. It's kind of like the traveling pants, and they move around the country, and our editors and our producers work with them remotely to capture what we need. So we're very proud of that. We will finish everything we started. We only had to shut down a couple of our streaming movies. And that, we're looking at starting back up. We have films that shoot in New Orleans, Florida, Alabama, and Los Angeles, between films and television series, all of which are in the process of starting up. And we're dealing with all kinds of fun issues like insurance and unions and purchasing PPE,
right,
and creating new jobs, including safety advisors who will be on sets, and potential quarantine for cast members. A lot of
you had mentioned to me one production. I don't know if you're able to give a sneak peek to the audience about one production where you're using some interesting ways to produce with the married couple. Is that something you can talk about?
Yes, well, it's in development right now. In fact, it's shooting tonight as an experiment. We are looking at we made a movie at Blumhouse called Unfriended, which imagines the whole action taking place through what's called screencast, what we're doing right now. And that movie was made not in the time of Corona. It was made several years ago. And it was a conceit that worked. It wasn't COVID related. There's another movie called Searching with John Cho that we didn't produce, but came out more recently and is in fact a very similar.
Right, that was all based on like computers or something.
Right, a daughter goes missing in that movie, and John Cho's the father, and he spends his time trying to trace her tracks by being inside her computer and seeing her life. So inspired by both of those things, we said, let's up the ante and try to actually make a show in a movie in the same way that those looked, but with the real constraints of having to shoot them remotely. Because newsflash, while we shot some of those in camera, we were able to shoot real scenes and put them into screen frames.
Right.
So we're in the process of doing that. It looks a lot like animation. It's all storyboarded, and there's a process called pre-visualization. So it's all mapped out by an editorial team that then works with a director, so they know exactly how to shoot it and put it in frame. And then we send cameras to the actors. We then have production designers design it, and they're sent, plants and pictures and set dressing with instructions from the production designers how to do it, and costume designers are doing everything remotely. And we will see. We're shooting a selection of scenes over the next couple days, and we'll see if we think the quality is sufficient. We know the story that we're telling is great. Everyone that we've talked to thinks it's a terrific, as do we, a terrific story. So now we have to see if we can produce something at the quality level we want.
And to solve the issue of contact between cast members, you cast a married couple.
Yes, our plan currently is
to... You have to worry about the 6-foot contact issue. Which is
so
quite clever and elegant.
Yeah, and married or living together was the and a pool house, like where we had multiple rooms because we needed it to be multiple locations.
Fascinating.
So,
Fascinating.
It's really fun, yeah. And it's fun for the actors in a way too, because they're really embedded into the process, right? They have to shoot themselves. Mm-hmm. They are literally working with the set designer to dress their living space. So
So as you look into the future now, one of the obvious questions is, will there be a new normal in Hollywood? Will this just be a 1 year to 18-month issue, and then we have a vaccine and we should be back to normal? Do you think there will be any ways that the industry will be permanently changed, or you're not sure?
Well, in the short term, as we try to go back in places where, hopefully the restrictions have been lifted with proper kind of decline in cases, or places that have been fortunate enough to not be as deeply affected. I do think that until there's a vaccine, any shows that have an extreme amount of intimacy will no longer be made. There's just no way to keep, there is the quarantine idea, and that's certainly possibly a way to move forward, but it's very challenging, and understandably, actors are very worried about it. The idea of what closed sets look like when you actually shoot intimacy will now be part of the new normal in how we shoot regular things. And then I think virtual production, which is the way The Mandalorian was made for Disney Plus, where they did not, they shot the whole thing in a soundstage and then used technology that is similar to the way virtual reality is created inside the goggles. They took that technology and created it as an environment for things that aren't in a virtual reality kind of experience. And that technology is moving leaps and bounds right now. And a lot of complicated shows, even before COVID, the discussion was this a better way to make them, or a way to supplement normal production? So I think those things, I think the Mandalorian kind of virtual set is going to be here to stay. And I think the restricted content is not the preferred means of storytelling. So I think we would all, and I think our audiences will all want a more robust kind of environment as soon as we can make content that meets those parameters.
Yeah. Let's pivot now. I want to talk about your career. You were a foreign service student at Georgetown. I would argue that being a foreign service student in college and then becoming a major entertainment executive isn't necessarily the most linear path. So I'd love to hear if you could tell us at some of the major sort of beats, how you went from being a foreign service student who probably thought about a career in that area to today.
Look, I was very I was very involved in politics during my college years. I had spent some time in Washington in high school. I was a congressional page, so I had the Washington bug, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I really did think, whether it was going to be the Foreign Service or some career, that I think my interests were probably more in global entertainment, although that was not where I focused. In fact, it wasn't even an option in Foreign Service at the time.
Right.
It is more now. So I had a secret desire to move to Los Angeles. My family didn't think that was like the world's greatest idea. And being a dutiful firstborn daughter, I followed my parents' wishes to get a usable career. And I ultimately went to law school at NYU, following a year of working in the international affairs space. In Washington, I worked for the National Endowment for Democracy, which has its own kind of storied past, which we won't get into. But I did work for that organization and did a lot of really great international work in the area of kind of emerging democracies. But then I went to law school at NYU, which provided an opportunity for me to make it to the West Coast and to pursue the entertainment industry through the law. And I did ultimately, after law school, accept a position with a very kind of well-known LA-based law firm, but that had a global presence, and worked in the entertainment department on transactional work, and which exposed me to the opportunity to move in-house. And I went to a movie studio, and then I went to a small independent company, and eventually was able to parlay my kind of experience in law to an arena called business affairs, which is really the area of deal making in the entertainment industry. And then my roles continued to expand, where I became very involved in production, which is a tad unusual because I did not have a film school background or even a lot of on-set experience. But
Right.
I was really lucky to kind of pick up that discipline. And then it ultimately led to an opportunity to lead a company on all aspects of the business, including the creative. So
Yeah.
I
And
kind of have my dream job now.
yeah, and you spent a number of years in a very senior role at AMC Networks. So I
Yes.
mean, that must have been just a fascinating time, because you guys were creating some of the most heralded television programming in sort of this golden age that we talk about. What was that
Well,
like?
look, I've been super lucky in my career. I had although most people think I was an executive, I was actually a longtime consultant to the Fox networks, where our paths crossed, Rich.
Yep.
In fact, we found a funny story, which we won't get into now. With Rich, our paths crossed in a way Rich didn't even know about, which is kind of funny. I've had a really great opportunity. I was at Fox during the time when the first independent studio, Fox 21, was created. I was there in creating that studio, and it's gone on to make shows like Homeland and many of the Ryan Murphy shows. I equally worked for the Fox network, I worked in the early days of reality television, the first 6 or 7 seasons of American Idol, during the real kind of heyday of the creation of that business, which is
Those were really exciting times.
It was a super exciting time, and the opportunity to work on #1 shows was, you don't get that opportunity all the time, and I was just in the right place at the right time. When I moved to AMC, it was at the very beginning of AMC's venture beyond a movie channel into the space of making scripted content. And AMC was a very early adopter in the basic cable space of making premium content, Mad Men being the first show and Breaking Bad being the second. I came to AMC after those 2 shows were already on the air. When AMC decided, rather than having third parties make shows for them that they would license, that they wanted to build their own studio and make their own shows. And I happened to come in to work on a little show called The Walking Dead, which, at the time, it's really great to say we thought it would be this massive global phenomenon. I mean, I remember my interview, and Charlie Collier, who's now president of the Fox network and was president of AMC, asked me if I thought betting on zombies was the right thing to do to start the studio. And I said no. I said, I will do whatever it takes to make this great, but I would not have taken the bet. And they had taken the bet before I got there. So I was 100%, 1,000% wrong, but I was charged with turning it into a very successful business. And we did the first global launch of a television series. We made a partnership with the Fox International channels. And the show, which is very difficult to do because it was dubbed in many, many languages, to get it to be released at the same time in the US as it was being released internationally. And initially, it was within the first week. And then by the 3rd season, it was within the same 24 hours. And that's done now on all shows. But at the time, it was, it wasn't done. And then I was there for both the renewal of Mad Men and Breaking Bad and the planning for the end of those shows. And I was there at the beginning of Netflix really buying scripted television shows. I was involved in, Mad Men was their first show, Breaking Bad was their second. Many people believe Breaking Bad was original to Netflix, which pains everyone at AMC. Oh yeah, the research on it shows that. Wow. And I made AMC, it was the first output deal of its time, where all of the content on AMC, owned by AMC, would go to Netflix. And this was when Netflix was domestic only, before they were a global brand, as a second window. And that really defined our industry. And, was just, again, I didn't pick these shows, but I had the opportunity to work on really seminal television. I mean, the time I was at AMC, we won the Emmy for Best Drama 5 out of the 6 years I was there. So that's kind of cool.
You know, Blumhouse is one of the few, I think you would deem it an independent production company in the marketplace. There aren't that many these days. What are your thoughts on the challenges with that, and what are some of the advantages to it?
So there are a lot of challenges. There were challenges before COVID. And as the media industry consolidates, and as we see what I like to call walled universes develop in the streaming space, HBO Max for only Warner properties, Peacock for only Universal properties, right. Netflix really now making their own shows, Amazon making their own shows, although still partnering with independents, Hulu now part of the Disney family. It becomes increasingly difficult to be an independent studio and maintain any of the business economics that make being an independent studio worth it. There's certainly always interest if you have great content in partnering, but the business relationships can become very challenged. I continue to think, we did a survey before COVID of, we looked at the number of shows that were nominated for awards, both in the limited series space and in the drama space. And there is a disproportionate number of shows that are produced by independent studios, from Sony to Lionsgate to Blumhouse to anonymous content. And that says something to me about the importance of independent studios, because we are very focused on talent. We're very focused on hands-on producing. You know, it's not, the executives are very involved. We're both producers and executives. And that ensures quality control. And it ensures, you know, there's a level of kind of creativity that I think in a more independent environment can flourish. So we hope that that calling card will continue to make independence super relevant. I do think COVID will create a need for lots of production capability, at least initially. It's, I think, hard to imagine that Netflix can ramp back up for the huge number of shows they're doing all on their own. Right. And likewise at the smaller streamers as well. So hopefully that will open new pathways. You know, the entertainment industry, the changes have been rapid. And it used to be every 2 years you'd start to see a change. AMC making dramas on basic cable something that everyone adopted. But that change was slower. And now, you know, what was true 6 months ago, COVID aside, isn't true any longer. 6 months ago, there wasn't HBO Max, Peacock, Disney Plus, Apple launched about a year ago, but it's a shocking number of new places for content to go. So we hope that'll help us, but
yeah, for sure. With our few minutes left, I'd love to finish off by asking you your thoughts on advice for people interested in breaking into either entertainment at large or the television industry. What are some of your kind of key pillars of advice that you like to?
Well, look, there used to be a lot of people, and there are a lot of people that went from the law into running or being part of studios in many capacities, not just the business capacities, but creative capacities as well. And that used to be, I think, a really accepted pathway in our industry. I've been asked this question a lot, including a GEMA thing I did in Washington a couple years ago. If you want to go into the entertainment industry, I don't recommend going to law school. I don't know that path is as robust as it used to be. I do, however, think that going to film school as an undergraduate is not ideal. There's one film school in Los Angeles that we quite like the way the undergrads come out, and we think they're very well prepared to kind of enter the space. But knowing how the world works and worked, and knowing history and literature and just the ability to do kind of critical thinking, all are phenomenal skills if you want to then fly from, the hilltop to the West Coast, the left coast, and really get in. And, the way to get into the entertainment industry is ground floor jobs coming from really prestigious schools. It's a business of apprenticeship. You can't really learn how to do it unless you are in it. And that's why it remains a business of apprenticeship. And I recommend, I originally thought I wanted to go be a PA, and I was, I did not do so. But I think that path would have served me just as well as my fancy law degree, although I'm a pretty good lawyer too.
One question on the legal piece for clarification. If somebody wants to be a lawyer in Hollywood, then going to law school, I would think, is perfectly fine.
Oh, right. 100%.
You're suggesting more if you wanted to be on the creative side more, or maybe break out of the legal mold. Is that
correct? I mean, I just don't know that the pathway to being an entertainment lawyer, which is a fantastic career, by the way, but I don't know that the pathway to being an entertainment lawyer, entertainment lawyers translating to executives is as robust as it used to be.
And why is that?
I think, again, it's about apprenticeship. I think that there aren't as many people running studios who come from a law background. And they used to be, a lot of studio heads were lawyers. Now a lot of studio heads are, MBAs or former marketing executives, or come from a producerial background. And so I think the aperture has widened. And so it's just there's less people that are be like, if you have a law degree, you'll be an excellent studio executive.
Right. That's helpful. That's interesting insight. I hadn't really thought about much.
And in fact, sometimes I think it's a negative, because I think deal making in Hollywood has gotten increasingly complicated. And so at the end of the day, the goal is to find great programs and not be bogged down in, making the perfect deal. And I think, and I've certainly experienced this personally, where, the perfect deal may not be the way to get the perfect show.
Yeah. Well, Marci, this has been great. It's been really helpful to speak to someone in the TV production realm, because we haven't done that yet. And to hear the real practical situations you're dealing with and challenges you're dealing with and how you're actually adapting for them is actually really interesting.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And I love talking about how we're adapting, because it's honestly one of the most, it's challenging and fun. And we have this amazing team of people who, I just got off some calls this morning where, it was breakfast time to figure out, everyone had to come to the table to say how we were solving, unique problems we haven't seen before. So
interesting. No, that's great. Well, thanks. Enjoy your Friday, and we will see each other soon physically, I hope.
Hopefully. Well, we can pass each other in a social distance walk in our neighborhood. So it was great seeing you, Rich.
Thanks, Marci.
Take care. Bye.